"Sir, I need you to stand up." The sound wasn't just a request. It was a blade slicing through the still air of first class. Cole Maddox looked up. For a moment, everything froze. The cursor blinked on his laptop screen, reflecting the face of a 36-year-old man, calm, composed, yet with eyes as deep and dark as a storm-tossed lake. In front of him stood a young flight attendant, Brian Lee, wearing a perfectly practiced smile, soft as silk but empty of warmth. Behind Brian, a woman in an ivory Chanel suit, Camilla Rhodes, rested her hand lightly on the seat divider, as if she had merely been waiting for this moment to assert, "This is my seat." No explanation was needed, no justification required. It was all written in her posture, in the slight tilt of her chin, in her refusal to meet his gaze. "She's a platinum-tier passenger, sir," Brian said, his tone polite, steady, and cruel in its precision. "There's been a small change in seating. We appreciate your cooperation." A few heads turned. Several phones lifted discreetly, recording what they thought was the quiet restoration of social order. Cole inhaled slowly, hearing the pulse in his ears. On his phone screen, the words were clear. Seat 1A, confirmed, paid, reserved 4 weeks ago. No error, no mistake. He stood, not in protest, not in anger, but with a gaze cold and sharp as tempered steel, taking in every detail. Camilla stepped forward, her heels striking the floor with the sound of ownership. Brian smiled at her with the kind of reverence he had never shown Cole. As Cole left the cabin, the air behind him thickened. Someone shook their head. Someone else whispered. An older man leaned toward his wife and murmured, "I don't know why they let him in first class to begin with." His wife nodded, lips pursed into a thin, judgmental line. Cole had heard that sentence 100 times before, in boardrooms, in hotels, in high-end restaurants, and he had long since learned to recognize the moment when people decided he didn't belong. He walked down the aisle, black backpack slung over one shoulder, his polished shoes catching the soft cabin light. No escort, no acknowledgement. Just another man out of place. When he sat in seat 18C, the old leather creaked beneath his weight. The passenger beside him adjusted noise, cancelling headphones without so much as a glance. Cole reopened his laptop and finished the line of the email he had been writing, notes for tomorrow's board meeting. The tone remained professional, but every keystroke pulsed with controlled fury. Behind him, the cabin door sealed shut. The Boeing shuddered. A single ding sounded. The flight began. In seat 1A, Camilla ordered her second glass of champagne before takeoff. She smiled at Brian, the kind of smile born from entitlement, not gratitude. Her eyes seemed to say, "Order has been restored." Cole said nothing. But in his mind, the data was already aligning itself. The employee's name. The timestamp of the seat reassignment. The priority policy they had just invoked. He had seen those words before, hidden in contracts, used as defenses by systems that thought they could rationalize prejudice. He understood them, and he knew exactly how to dismantle them. No one in row 18 saw the flicker of cold steel in his eyes. No one knew that the man they had just downgraded was the only person on that plane who could paralyze the entire airline with a single command. Sent from the laptop before him. The plane accelerated. The light outside stretched into a silver streak. And as the wheels lifted from the ground, Cole Maddox leaned back, his lips curling ever so slightly, not into a smile, but into a promise. A promise that by the time they discovered who the man they had humiliated truly was, the one who could bring an entire aviation empire to its knees, it would already be far too late. The sound of a service cart bumped softly against the metal wall, echoing through the cabin. Cole Maddox looked up and saw Patrick Sloane, the chief flight attendant, tall, silver-haired, composed, wearing the kind of polished smile only a man who had survived thousands of flights without ever revealing emotion could manage. "Mr. Maddox," Patrick said, his tone measured, steady, as neutral as the hum of an elevator tune. "I've been informed there was a small mix up in the seat assignment." "A mix-up?" Cole tilted his head slightly, his voice low and calm. "I don't think I misunderstood anything. My ticket clearly says 1A. Patrick glanced down at the tablet in his hand, scrolling with the tip of his finger as if to verify the data. "The system shows that seat 1A was reassigned this morning due to a priority request from upper management. We've upgraded your seat to Premium Plus to compensate for the inconvenience." The way he said compensate was light as air, but to Cole it landed like an accusation. "Priority request," Cole repeated, tasting each word. "And what exactly defines that priority, if I may ask?" Patrick hesitated, not for long, just for a single breath, but long enough for someone like Cole to see the first crack in his mask of professionalism. "Sir," Patrick replied, maintaining his practiced composure, "that decision came from corporate level. I'm not authorized to disclose the details of another passenger." "I see." Cole nodded slowly. "So I pay in full, book 4 weeks in advance, confirm 3 times, and yet whenever corporate level decides, they can simply take my seat. Is that correct?" Patrick didn't answer. His silence said everything. In the row ahead, a middle-aged man stole a glance before retreating behind his copy of the Financial Times, pretending not to listen. A blonde woman sighed softly, just enough to be heard. A sound of quiet satisfaction, the relief of seeing the natural order restored. Cole looked down at his hands. His palms tightened, the pulse in his wrist steady but heavy, like the pounding of iron against iron. He knew this language, the language of policy, of procedure, of strategic customer prioritization. Words that always sounded polite, refined, reasonable, but beneath them lay a system of exclusion disguised as order. Patrick stood still, waiting for a reaction. A bead of sweat traced the side of his temple, visible only to those who looked closely. He had dealt with angry passengers before, the ones who yelled, slammed tables, made scenes, and he knew how to handle them. But this man was different. No shouting, no arguing. Just a gaze so unwavering it made Patrick feel that, despite being the one in control of the seat assignment, he was the one being judged. At last, Patrick forced a polite smile. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Maddox. We'll make sure you're as comfortable as possible." Then he turned and walked away. Cole's eyes followed him, lingering on the digital display above the cabin door. 6:47 p.m. 17 minutes delayed. Every detail he recorded in his mind like a programmer logging system data. The time, the people, the exact words spoken, even the subtle shift in their breathing when they lied. Up front, Camilla Rhodes was settled comfortably in seat 1A, her champagne glinting under the golden light. She said something to Brian, and both laughed. From row 18C, Cole could only see the curve of her face, but he didn't need the full view. He knew her type, born into a world where every door opened automatically. He reopened his laptop, but didn't type. On the screen was the Aurelia Air contract, lines of code, infrastructure clauses, encrypted integration frameworks. He knew their system better than anyone, because he built it. He once believed progress came from partnership, that this contract represented a step toward equality. But now, he realized he had been wrong. A faint vibration ran through the aircraft. Cole looked up toward the front cabin. Camilla tilted her head back and laughed again, the light catching her glass. Patrick stood beside her, leaning in slightly, lowering his head just enough to show deference, to show who was worth prioritizing. Cole smiled faintly, not out of humor, but out of understanding. The thing they called policy was nothing more than institutionalized disdain. And this time, the system they used to exclude him was the very system he could shut down whenever he wished. In the cabin, the engines hummed softly. Cole leaned back, closed his eyes, and in the artificial calm of the flight, a plan began to form, precise, calculated, and irreversible. The cabin lights shifted to a soft golden hue. The plane leveled at cruising altitude. No one on board realized that the man sitting quietly in seat 18C held the heartbeat of the entire airline in his hands. Cole Maddox reopened his laptop. The cool blue light reflected across his face, its features calm, yet his eyes glinted sharp as a surgeon's blade. On the screen, a system dashboard came alive. Aurelia Air Operational Cloud Framework. Status: active. The words pulsed, beautiful and merciless. One single command, and their entire flight network would go dark. Cole had built this platform himself. Vertex Core Technologies, the company he had founded from nothing, spent nearly a year negotiating with Aurelia. 9 months of talks, 200 technical meetings, thousands of hours of coding, and over $700 million in contracts. And only one person held the authority to shut it all down. Him. He remembered the day of the signing at Aurelia headquarters, a glass tower, a room glittering with cameras. Evelyn Hart, the CEO, had shaken his hand with a smile too polished to be genuine. "This marks a new chapter for fairness and partnership," she had said. Tonight, she was about to learn what fairness truly meant. A soft ding echoed through the cabin. Brian Lee reappeared, moving down the aisle, his eyes sweeping across each row while carefully avoiding Cole's. He only wanted to confirm that the minor issue had been handled. And indeed, Cole had been silent, but not out of acceptance. He was observing. He was watching Camilla Rhodes, the woman who now sat in his seat, with the precision of a scientist. She carried herself with the effortless poise of inherited privilege. Crisp collar, gleaming gold ring, the steady confidence of someone who believed the world existed to accommodate her. She was on a call, her voice sharp and clear, not bothering to lower it. "These diversity programs are ruining everything," she said, pouring herself another glass of champagne. "People are promoted for optics, not merit. It's ridiculous." The middle-aged man beside her chuckled in agreement. "You're right. People are so afraid of being called biased. They've created a new kind of bias." Their laughter filled the cabin, brazen and unashamed, like a declaration of ownership. Cole remained still, though every word cut into him like a knife twisting in the same wound over and over. He thought of other moments, all echoes of this one. When a security guard stopped him in a corporate lobby, asking, "Are you here to deliver something?" even though his name was printed in bold on the conference list. When, in a boardroom, a white colleague repeated his exact idea and was met with applause. When a bank executive had told him, "We don't think your company has the scale to qualify for premier status," he had stayed silent then, to avoid being labeled sensitive. But not this time, not anymore. Cole opened a second tab, Protocol Omega, Dormant Mode. He had written it a year ago, a simple security contingency tool. Now it was something else entirely, a symbol of choice. One line of code, and Aurelia Air would never launch another flight. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, scrolling through system parameters. Everything appeared stable. Everything still believed that everything was fine. He smiled faintly, a smile no one would ever see. Not out of arrogance, but because he had just recognized the irony. They had taken the seat from the one man on this plane capable of grounding their entire empire. A subtle tremor rippled through the fuselage. The lights dimmed slightly. A hush settled over the cabin. Cole looked out the window. The sky outside was a deep indigo, streaked with silver threads of cloud. Up here, everyone believed they were on top of the world. But in the realm of data and power, altitude was not measured by how high you flew. It was measured by who controlled the right to take off and who was forced to stay grounded. Up front, Camilla tilted her head, smiling in quiet satisfaction. She didn't know that her smile had just become the timestamp for an irreversible chain of consequences. Cole closed his laptop, leaned back, and exhaled. Outside, the engines hummed steadily. Inside, a silent revolution had begun, sparked from an economy seat, born in the mind of a man once deemed not important enough. And then he whispered, just loud enough for himself to hear, "All right then. Let's see who truly holds operational priority." "No, I've made myself clear, Daniel. Those so-called priority policies only make true competence invisible." Camilla Rhodes's voice carried clearly through the hushed air of first class. She sat slightly turned, champagne glass in hand, her golden hair catching the warm cabin light. Her tone was measured, each word chosen carefully, as if she were delivering a speech the world needed to hear. "You see," she continued, "we can't just give people opportunities because they look different. That's not fairness. That's pity." The man in 1B, clearly an investor, smiled approvingly. "Exactly. We're turning the workplace into a political playground." Their glasses clinked. Champagne fizzed. In row 18, Cole Maddox sat still, his eyes half closed. But every word they spoke fell into his mind like pebbles dropping into a still pond, creating ripples, cold and unending. He wasn't angry, not the kind of anger that explodes or shouts. His anger was quiet, deliberate, and disciplined, the kind only someone who had been underestimated too many times could master. He had learned it at 21, entering his first corporation, where every sentence he spoke was interrupted, every achievement labeled luck. He had learned to stay silent and observe, because sometimes silence was the strongest form of rebellion. It made oppressors believe he had submitted, while in truth he was only recording, memorizing the details he would one day use to make them answer for it. Cole's phone buzzed. A message from Renee Alvarez, his legal advisor, flashed on the screen. "Sending you the summary. 7 discrimination settlements in the past 24 months. 4 involve downgraded or removed black passengers from first class. DOT opened an inquiry, but Aurelia handled it internally. I think you'll want to see this." Cole opened the file. The screen lit up with a single line. "Pattern confirmed. Systemic bias detected." He exhaled slowly, resting his head against the seat. This system wasn't broken. It was designed to be flawed. He had once believed change came from within, that partnering with Aurelia Air was a way to weave fairness into the DNA of corporate infrastructure. But watching Camilla Rhodes sit there, preaching about real merit while occupying the seat he had paid for, he understood something deeper. Fairness could not be negotiated with those who didn't believe it existed. Up front, Patrick Sloan spoke quietly with Brian Lee near the bar. His voice was low, but sharp enough for Cole to hear. "She's aboard, level priority passenger. Orders came straight from the CEO's office. There's nothing we can do." Brian smirked faintly. "As long as it's quiet, who cares?" Cole opened his laptop. The command protocol Omega was still visible, silent, waiting. He hovered his cursor over the activate button, then stopped. No, not yet. He didn't want revenge. He wanted consequence. They wouldn't just lose face, they would lose what they valued most: control. Camilla's voice rose again, filled with confidence. "We're raising a generation that believes they deserve things just because they're different. It's absurd." Cole opened his eyes, his gaze locking on her, calm but sharp as a laser. She had no idea that every word she spoke was being recorded, not by him, but by another pair of eyes in the cabin. 3 rows ahead, a young woman in a grey hoodie, headphones around her neck, tilted her phone slightly, camera aimed toward Camilla. Her name was Zoe Carter, a UX designer for a small tech firm, and she was quietly capturing everything without anyone noticing. The light from her screen reflected in her eyes, the light of proof, of justice. Cole remained still. He knew the moment was approaching. He didn't need to say a word. The system would speak for him, through data, through consequences, through the inevitable exposure that would show those who felt entitled to judge others had forgotten who truly held the power to decide whether this plane would land safely or not. Cole closed his laptop, leaned back, and smiled faintly. Not out of satisfaction, but because he understood. Justice doesn't need to scream. It only needs the right moment to flip the switch. The flight had leveled at 35,000 feet. The golden cabin lights shimmered against champagne glasses, and everything seemed peaceful until a small light flickered from row 15. It was the glow from Zoe Carter's phone. The girl in the grey hoodie leaned slightly, angling her camera just enough so no one would notice she was recording. Her gaze swept briefly toward Camilla Rhodes, who was still lecturing the cabin about workplace ethics and real merit. "We're destroying our own standards," Camilla said, her voice sharp as a razor's edge. "Let me be honest, Daniel. I simply can't work with people who think skin color is a competitive advantage." A few chuckles rippled from the front row. Zoe felt her chest tighten. She didn't know Cole Maddox personally. She only knew of him from the news, the young CEO of Vertex Corp, the man partnering with Aurelia Air to revolutionize aviation technology. Yet here he was, sitting quietly in 18C, downgraded, humiliated, and still composed. Zoe took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she tapped record. A small red dot appeared on the corner of her screen. No narration, no drama, just truth. In row 18, Cole felt the gaze. He turned his head slightly, just enough to see Zoe filming. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. No words, only a silent understanding. He didn't stop her. He knew if justice needed a spark, that spark had just been lit. Minutes later, a prompt appeared on Zoe's screen. "Do you want to share this clip?" Her finger hovered, then pressed tweet. "Currently on Aurelia Flight 847. Just witnessed them force a black passenger out of seat 1A, his seat, booked weeks ago, to make room for a white woman referred to as a priority guest. That passenger is Cole Maddox, CEO of Vertex Corp Technologies, whose company is finalizing a $700 contract with Aurelia Air next week." She hit post. The screen brightened. The tweet went live, small, almost invisible, like the first drop of rain that touches still water. But the moment it landed, it began to ripple outward. 2 rows ahead, Patrick Sloan caught sight of Zoe. His instincts tingled. Something felt wrong. Before he could act, his phone buzzed. A Twitter notification. The hashtag #Aurelia8447 had started trending. 3 minutes later, an aviation news account retweeted it. 5 minutes later, a tech journalist confirmed, "Yes, that's Cole Maddox, the man leading Aurelia's AI infrastructure partnership." 7 minutes later, the post hit 10,000 shares. Up front, Camilla remained blissfully unaware. She was recording another voice memo, speaking about corporate discipline and how people confuse kindness with competence. Every sound, every self-satisfied gesture was captured perfectly. Zoe typed a second tweet. She's talking about how diversity destroys merit, while the man kicked out of his seat is their biggest partner. "I'm filming. All of it." The view count exploded. 50,000, 100,000, 250,000. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted. Passengers who had pretended not to hear now began to glance around. A young man opened his phone, scrolled through Twitter, and his eyes widened. In row 18, Cole said nothing. He only opened his own phone and saw Zoe's post. His photo, calm, focused, laptop open, was already spreading across hundreds of screens. Beside him, Camilla Rhodes sat in 1A, champagne raised, smiling with unshakable arrogance. He hadn't started this. But he didn't stop it either. Truth was doing its job on its own. At the bar in the front cabin, Brian Lee looked down at his phone, his face draining of color. "Oh, God," he whispered. Patrick Sloane approached, voice tense. "What is it?" Brian turned the screen toward him. Patrick froze. The image of Cole Maddox, CEO of Vertex Corp, seated in row 18C, filled the timeline. In seat 1A, Camilla kept talking, unaware that the world below was already on fire. Cole slowly closed his laptop. In the dim cabin light, his reflection appeared on the dark screen. There was nothing left to say. This time, he hadn't triggered the reckoning. The world had done it for him, with a single tweet, a video, and one brave young woman who refused to look away. Cole closed his eyes. A faint smile curved his lips. The wind had changed. On the 48th floor of Aurelia Air's headquarters, the afternoon sky was the same cold grey as CEO Evelyn Hart's face. Behind the reinforced glass walls, red alarm lights flashed across the central operations board. The word scrolling across the main screen read, "Integration failure. Server access denied." "That's impossible," Evelyn whispered. The coffee on her desk was still steaming, but her hands were ice cold. "Report. What's happening?" The voice of CTO Naomi Chen came through the intercom, quick and uneven. "Ma'am, our entire global infrastructure system has frozen. We can't access the Vertex Core Cloud platform. Flight schedules, fuel optimization, baggage routing, everything is locked." Evelyn shot to her feet. "You mean we're being hacked?" "No, not hacked." Naomi paused, then spoke slowly, each word like a verdict. "Our access has been revoked." The room fell silent, so silent they could hear the pounding of their own hearts. Outside the glass walls, Aurelia airplanes lined the skies one after another. But inside the system, every single one displayed the same status. No data. Evelyn gripped her phone tightly and turned to Richard Hale, the COO. "Get Vertex Core on the line. Call Cole Maddox. Right now." Richard shook his head, his face pale. "We've tried. Every call goes straight to voicemail. He's on. Flight 847. A bead of sweat slid down Evelyn's temple. "Dear God," she breathed, her voice trembling. "That flight." She tapped a second screen to life. A live social media feed flooded the wall, numbers surging like a tidal wave. Aurelia 847. 1.3 million tweets. CEO of Vertex Core removed from first class by Aurelia staff. Comments, videos, images everywhere. In one viral clip, Cole Maddox's face was clearly visible, seated calmly in 18C, while in 1A, Camilla Rhodes sipped champagne, smiling smugly. "Oh my God," Evelyn staggered back as if struck. "Our staff removed, our $700 million partner." No one answered, because no one needed to. On the emergency comms line, Naomi shouted, "Backup servers are also locked out. Our entire operational framework runs on Vertex Core's platform. We can't manually reboot." "What about the flight coordination system?" Evelyn demanded. "We can't calculate routes. Pilots don't have load data. We're flying blind." Everyone turned to the massive flight map. The icons representing aircraft, once moving steadily across the world, were now frozen, one by one, like a flock of birds losing direction mid-air. "You're telling me if we don't recover within the next few hours, the entire flight network will collapse," Naomi interrupted, her voice cracking, "and the whole world will know." And indeed, the world already knew. CNN went live with breaking coverage. A red ticker ran across the bottom of the screen. "Breaking. Tech partner freezes Aurelia air system after alleged racial incident." The footage replayed again and again. A flight attendant bowing to Camilla, Cole standing and leaving his seat, his face calm amid a sea of contemptuous stares. Each time it aired, Aurelia's stock price sank further. Evelyn clutched her head, her voice hoarse. "Richard, call an emergency board meeting. I want a crisis plan in 30 minutes. "Ma'am, we don't have 30 minutes. "What do you mean?" "Investors are already pulling out. And," Richard swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper, "the FAA just issued notice. If systems aren't restored within 90 minutes, all active flights will be forced to make emergency landings." Evelyn looked back at the screen. Over 600 aircraft, tens of thousands of passengers, all dependent on the man they had humiliated just hours earlier. She sank into her chair. "Dear God, we've shot ourselves in the heart." On Flight 847, Patrick Sloan received the transmission through his earpiece. His face went pale. He turned to Brian Lee, his voice trembling. "Ground control just called. They said, prepare to receive Mr. Maddox as VIP. Operations is waiting at the gate." Brian stammered, "What about Ms. Rhodes?" Patrick didn't answer. The truth was written in his eyes. Camilla was no longer the priority. The cabin remained silent, but an invisible current charged the air. Zoe Carter gripped her phone tighter, her live stream still running. Viewers had surpassed 300,000. Cole leaned back against his seat, his gaze fixed on the window. The sky outside remained calm. But below, an empire was collapsing. In the reflection of the glass, he smiled faintly, not with triumph, but with the quiet satisfaction of a man watching justice awaken. And when the captain's voice came over the intercom, "Prepare for landing," Cole whispered, barely audible. "Now let's see what they learn from the fall." The familiar ding echoed through the cabin, signaling the start of descent. It was an ordinary sound, yet the air inside the plane grew thick, as if someone had drained the oxygen from the room. Phones buzzed non-stop. Notifications, breaking news. The hashtag #Aurelia847 was climbing fast. In row 18, Cole Maddox unlocked his screen and saw his face plastered across Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. The caption beneath it was the kind of line that could shake an entire industry. "Aurelia Air just forced the CEO of Vertex Corp out of seat 1A to make room for a white VIP guest. Their $700 million contract just flew out the window." Cole set his phone down, his fingers tapping lightly against the armrest. He wasn't smug, nor angry, only calm, the kind of quiet that belongs to a man who had seen every move coming long before it happened. At the front of the cabin, Camilla Rhodes froze. A message from a colleague lit up her phone. "Are you on Flight 847? Be careful, it's blowing up. It's blowing. The guy they removed is someone big." Camilla looked up, scanning the cabin, and her eyes found Cole in row 18. His expression was composed, unreadable, terrifying in its calm. In that moment, she understood she was no longer the center of this world. She was standing in the middle of a storm she had started. From the cockpit, the captain's voice came through, steady as ever. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing in Chicago in 20 minutes. Thank you for choosing Aurelia Airways." He didn't know that in those 20 minutes, his entire company was unraveling like a row of dominoes. At Aurelia Air's headquarters, 1,500 miles away, the operations floor had become chaos. CEO Diana Westbrook stormed into the control center, clutching her laptop, eyes fixed on the crimson alerts flashing across the monitors. "Access denied. Server offline. Cloud integration suspended." She called the CTO, her voice trembling. "Are we under attack?" The voice on the other end rasped. "No, we've been locked out by our partner, Vertex Core. Just revoked all system access." Diana's breath quickened, her knuckles whitening against the desk. "God, don't tell me this is connected to Flight 847. A pale-faced assistant rushed in. "Ma'am, the media's reporting it. Hashtag Aurelia 847 has over 2 million shares. They've identified him. It's Cole Maddox." The name hung in the air like a curse. The man they had humiliated on that flight, the one they had forced out of 1A, was the same man controlling their entire operational infrastructure. Diana fought to steady her voice. "Initiate the backup servers." "We can't, ma'am. Everything runs through their platform. We have zero access." "Contact Cole Maddox, immediately." "He's still in the air. His phone's on airplane mode." She slammed her fist on the table. The flight dashboard showed hundreds of Aurelia aircraft drifting across the map, icons blinking red, disconnected from data feeds, their positions frozen. Dear God. Back on Flight 847, Cole gazed out the window. The sky outside was streaked with crimson, the glow of sunset bleeding into the clouds. Beneath him, hundreds of thousands of feet of still air. But in his mind, systems and servers were shutting down one by one, each obeying the command he'd sent 40 minutes earlier. In row 15, Zoe still held her phone, live streaming. The viewer count had passed 300,000. Comments scrolled non-stop. Unbelievable. That's really the CEO. Aurelia is done. A middle-aged passenger whispered, "You think he can really bring down the entire airline?" The man beside him murmured, "Not just can, he already is." The seatbelt sign lit up. The cabin trembled softly as the plane began its descent. Patrick Sloan, the head attendant, walked down the aisle, sweat beading on his forehead. He stopped at row 18. "Mr. Maddox," his voice unsteady. "Headquarters would like to meet you the moment we land." Cole looked up, his gaze cold enough to make Patrick swallow hard. "Good," he said quietly. "Because I have something to say to them, too." In that moment, everyone understood. This landing wouldn't just mark the end of a flight. It would mark the beginning of a reckoning. The tires hit the runway with a sharp, thunderous jolt. The plane shuddered, then slowed to a stop. The cabin fell into absolute silence. Someone whispered, "What's he going to do now?" Cole unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. The air vent above hissed softly, carrying the faint metallic scent of ozone. He looked around, his voice calm, every word deliberate. "Now," he said, "they'll find out exactly how much seat 1A is really worth." A thin, quiet smile crossed his lips, cold, steady, and certain. The storm had touched down. No one moved when the cabin door opened. Not a whisper, not even a breath. Every passenger's eyes turned forward to where Cole Maddox rose from seat 18C, adjusted his backpack, and stepped into the aisle like a man leaving a battlefield he had won without firing a single shot. Outside the door, a group of people in grey suits was waiting. Their faces were tight, their eyes frantic. Leading them was Evelyn Hart, CEO of Aurelia Air, the same woman whose face had graced the cover of Fortune magazine just last month with the headline, "The Woman Who Saved Aviation." Now, she was merely a trembling figure trying to mask her fear. "Mr. Maddox," Evelyn stammered. We—" Cole raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Are you here to talk about seat 1A or the $700 million currently frozen?" Evelyn's face drained of all color. The question hit like a bullet, sharp and inescapable. Around them, passengers began lifting their phones, recording everything. The glow of the terminal lights reflected in Cole's eyes. Cold, but clear. Terrifyingly steady. 3 hours ago, he said evenly, your staff told me I didn't belong in first class. 10 minutes later, Aurelia Air's entire operations network shut down. I'd say those two events are connected. A collective gasp rippled through the air. Evelyn stepped back half a pace. Behind her, Patrick Sloan and Brian Lee hung their heads, sweat dripping down their temples. Camilla Rhodes, the woman in the Chanel suit who had taken his seat, remained frozen where she sat, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. Cole turned his gaze back to Evelyn. "I don't need an apology," he said. "I need accountability." That sentence struck like lightning through Aurelia's headquarters. The footage went viral within minutes. Live streams, news alerts, hashtags. CNN launched a breaking segment titled "At Aurelia Crisis." Every major outlet replayed the moment Cole stepped off the plane. Calm, composed, surrounded by flashing cameras. 72 hours later, the world called it the perfect storm in modern aviation. Aurelia's stock dropped 14% on the first trading day, then another 9% by the next morning. 3 strategic investors cancelled their meetings. The Department of Transportation announced an immediate investigation. Inside Aurelia's Chicago boardroom, chaos reigned. Evelyn Hart sat at the head of the table, her eyes sunken, her voice hoarse. "We need a plan, an emergency proposal, something, anything that can convince Vertex Corp." The legal advisor clicked to a presentation titled Diversity and Accountability Initiative, Draft 1.0. The room glowed in the cold blue light of the projector. Mandatory training on bias and discriminatory conduct. Independent reporting system for employees and passengers. Third, party oversight with quarterly public reports. And revised priority guest policy based on transparent, data-driven criteria, free from racial, gender, or status bias. Establishment of a passenger advocacy council with community representation. A marketing director spoke up, his voice shaking. "Do we even know if he'll read it?" Evelyn lifted her head. "He'll read it." She glanced down at her phone, where the screen flashed Cole Maddox. Call missed. X7. And if he doesn't, there won't be a company left to talk about. That afternoon, the proposal was sent. Alongside it, Aurelia issued a formal 12-page apology, published across every platform. But what stunned everyone was the closing paragraph. Evelyn's personal signature beneath a declaration accepting full responsibility should the reform plan fail. An hour later, her phone rang. Cole Maddox. His voice was low and calm, like still water after a storm. "I've read your proposal." Evelyn held her breath. "And?" "Not bad," he said. "But not enough." "Not enough?" "I want 3 things," he said firmly. 1. Quarterly reports must be audited by an independent firm of my choosing. 2. If any discriminatory incident occurs, the contract terminates immediately. 3. You sign a personal accountability clause. No representation, no delegation. You. There was silence on the other end. Evelyn tightened her grip on the phone. "You're asking for a public apology, aren't you?" Cole chuckled softly, his voice cutting through the line like a cold blade. "No, ma'am. I'm asking for the system to change." Then he hung up. That night, headlines flooded every screen. Vertex Corps refuses to reinstate 700 Madeleine's contract until Aurelia proves it deserves trust. Among millions of comments, one stood out. Posted by Zoe Carter, the girl in the grey hoodie who had started it all. He didn't do it for revenge. He did it so no one else would have to go through the same thing. And just like that, Aurelia's corporate scandal became a global movement. Justice in the sky. 3 days, 70, 2 hours, and the entire aviation industry would never be the same again. 10 days after the media storm, the world had changed color. From Aurelia Air's boardrooms to government corridors, everyone was talking about the 1A incident, the event that brought a corporate giant to its knees because of a single, seemingly small act of arrogance. And at the center of it all, Cole Maddox remained silent. He gave no interviews, wrote no statements, posted nothing. He only watched as those who once dismissed him now bowed before the truth. In Aurelia's Chicago headquarters, Evelyn Hart sat alone in the empty boardroom. Her hand rested on a document, the renewed contract with Vertex Corps, now twice as thick, filled with new conditions. At the top, in bold type, was the clause, "Agreement reinstated under condition of verified structural reform," signed personally by Evelyn Hart. She looked up as her assistant entered. "The press is asking if you're planning to resign." Evelyn pressed her lips together. "Not if," she said softly. "When?" Her eyes were rimmed red. At 58, she had once been a symbol of women's success in aviation. Now, her name was cited as a lesson in accountability, in the cost of silence in the face of injustice. Camilla Rhodes, the woman who had sat in seat 1A, had vanished from public view. A week after the incident, the media revealed that she had been dismissed by the board and stripped of all shareholder privileges. But the real blow came from Vertex Corps. Cole filed a personal lawsuit, not for money, but to set a precedent. The evidence included Zoe Carter's recording, passenger testimonies, and Aurelia's own internal communication logs. The hearing lasted 3 hours. In the end, Camilla signed a settlement worth $850,000, along with a binding clause, permanently prohibited from holding any managerial or board position in any aviation organization. She left the courthouse no longer the powerful woman who had smirked in 1A, but a shadow behind oversized black sunglasses, dodging cameras, dodging her own past. Patrick Sloan and Brian Lee, the 2 flight attendants involved, were suspended indefinitely. Patrick, once proud of his 30-year spotless record, now worked for a small Midwestern airline, his management badge gone. Brian became a hotel receptionist where no one knew his story, and where every guest complaint made his stomach sink, as if he were being judged by his own conscience. Meanwhile, Zoe Carter, the girl who had dared to stand up, received a job offer from Vertex Corps. Her new title, Director of Technology Ethics and User Advocacy. On her first day, Cole met her in the morning conference room. "You don't need a communications expert," she asked, half joking. Cole shook his head. "I need someone who saw injustice and chose to act. Justice doesn't need credentials, Zoe. It needs courage." Zoe smiled. She had never imagined that a single video on a flight could change her life's course. She understood now. There are moments when silence is the greatest sin. A month later, Aurelia Air announced the Aurelia Rising Scholarship, $3.2 million per year for black students pursuing aviation careers. The funds came directly from a 25% reduction in executive salaries. When the press asked if Cole had accepted any compensation, he replied simply, "No, that money should fix the system, not buy back a conscience." His words spread like wildfire. They didn't just cement his image as a new symbol of justice in business. They resonated with millions who had suffered quietly, waiting for a voice. Finally, after 3 months, Aurelia and Vertex Corps announced a signed partnership. This time, the new clause was etched into the legal framework. Any verified act of discrimination will result in immediate termination of contract without further negotiation. The press conference was held in New York. Evelyn appeared weary but composed. Cole sat beside her in a black suit, silent. A reporter asked, "Mr. Maddox, will you continue to fly with Aurelia?" Cole smiled faintly and shook his head. "No. I don't fly on the bridge I had to burn so others could learn to rebuild it." The room fell completely silent. And in that moment, the world understood. Justice does not end with punishment. It ends with the redistribution of power, ensuring that those once privileged must relearn the first and most forgotten lesson. Respect is never a privilege. It is a duty. 6 months after the 1A incident, the sky over Chicago was bluer than usual. Inside a tall glass building, Cole Maddox sat before a silver microphone as the red light in the recording booth came on. Across from him sat Mara Lynn, host of the renowned podcast Voices That Matter, which drew more than 800,000 listeners each week. "The question everyone wants answered," Mara began, her tone calm but probing. "Mr. Cole, people have called your actions revenge. What do you think about that?" Cole smiled, not with pride, but with the quiet grace of someone who had already walked through a storm. "It wasn't revenge," he said slowly. "It was consequence. Mara leaned forward, intrigued. Can you explain that difference? Revenge, Cole replied, lowering his voice until it carried the weight of conviction, is when you want others to feel the same pain you did. Consequence is when you want that pain to stop, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after. The room fell still, so silent that even the faint roll of a pen across the table could be heard. Cole glanced toward the window. Outside, the traffic flowed endlessly below, people moving quickly past one another, unaware that the conversation taking place in this quiet studio had once been written with the cost of an empire's collapse. Do you believe you changed the world? Mara asked. Cole shook his head. The world doesn't change in a single day, but at least it started listening. He paused, then added, Aurelia has reformed. They've launched scholarships, created an ethics department, placed people of color in leadership. But I know this, without someone willing to stand up, things would have gone back to the way they were. So no, I don't regret flipping that switch. But you used power that others don't have, Mara countered. Was that fair? Cole nodded. Completely. I had power, and that meant I had to use it. Millions of people have been dismissed, silenced, told they were too sensitive. They didn't have the tools. I did. If I didn't do something, then who would? His answer hung in the air. The studio light reflected off his face, not the image of a powerful CEO, but that of a man who had grown weary of proving his worth in places built to exclude him. When the recording ended, Cole left the studio. In the elevator, his phone buzzed. A new email. From Jamal.brightech.com. Subject: a thank you from someone who used to sit in the back row. I just started my first job at a big company. During the interview, I felt the look of doubt, the question, are you sure you belong here? And then I remembered your story. I said, I don't just belong. I deserve to be here. Thank you for giving me that courage. Cole read it several times, his lips curling into a small, genuine smile. That was the real reward, not $700 million, not stock or prestige, but a single sentence from a stranger, proof that change had begun to spread. That evening, he stood on his balcony, the air filled with the scent of the first spring rain. In the distance, an Aurelia airplane lifted into the sky, its red lights blinking against the night. He watched it rise, feeling no anger, no pride, only peace. Zoe Carter, now director of ethics at Vertex Corps, had once said in a meeting, "We can't change the entire world, but if we can make one person feel seen, respected, that's a beginning." Cole remembered those words. He knew justice wasn't fire meant to burn. It was light, small, steady, but never extinguished. He walked inside, opened his laptop. On the screen, a note glowed softly. Dignity isn't negotiable. Fairness isn't a privilege. It's a duty. He typed one last line, a message for those who would come after. If you have a voice, use it. If you have power, share it. And if you witness injustice, don't stay silent, because silence is complicity. Cole saved the document and closed the lid. He didn't need another speech, nor another spotlight. It was enough to know that somewhere out there, someone would no longer have to bow their head because of the color of their skin, their gender, or their origin. The Aurelia plane disappeared into the night, but somewhere beyond the clouds, justice kept flying, quiet, steady, and impossible to bring down. From the perspective of a specialist in corporate culture and ethics, the story of Cole Maddox is not merely a counterstrike in the sky, but a declaration of what it means to wield power responsibly in an age of subtle inequality. He did not choose revenge. He chose to make the system confront its own reflection. In that moment, Cole became a symbol of a new generation of leaders, those who understand that justice is not built on anger, but on unwavering resolve. When a man was forced to leave seat 1A, the world thought he had lost his place. But in truth, that was the very moment he reclaimed the position where dignity was meant to sit, the seat that leads the way for change. In a world where many choose silence as a form of safety, Cole reminds us that silence is also a choice, but justice has never been born from silence. Justice comes from those who dare to rise, to speak, to turn restraint into purposeful action. If you believe that respect is not a reward for the powerful, but the foundation of humanity itself, click. Like to help spread this message, and subscribe so you don't miss the stories that celebrate courage, dignity, and justice. Before you leave, share your belief in the comments. I stand up.